Well, an electrician was called out by a homeowner who was having trouble with their lights and some of their outlets. And some of them had started acting a little weird, dimming at times, flickering. And then they were running their vacuum cleaner and it sounded strange, like it wasn't really running at full speed. But now, some of those things just won't even turn on. So we called the electrician. And when the electrician came, the first thing he did was go and look at the breaker box. And when he opened up the box, he immediately saw the problem. It was a mess. Someone had come in and had connected some wires where they shouldn't be connected, and even had double loaded a couple of the breakers. And one of those breakers had burned up. And so the electrician fixed the connections and he removed the burnt breaker and replaced it with a new one, a good one. But whoever had done all that wrong wiring had really put this house in danger of being destroyed. And he put the people inside the house in danger as well. He had done things wrong. And then the electrician came and made it right. When people sin, when people disobey God and oppose His ways, it's like that guy who wired everything wrong. Spiritually speaking, of course. But sin is wrong. It's not how we were created to live. And it causes problems in our lives, and it hinders our relationship with God. And in fact, sin brings death. Sin is a big problem. It's wrong. But God has stepped in to make things right. He's still making things right, and one day everything will be good and right. And we see in our passage today that sin will be punished and that God will do away with evil, and one day He will make everything good. And so today we will read about the last 3 of the 8 visions that Zechariah saw in that one night. In the first 5, God was giving encouragement and hope for the people who were facing these huge tasks under difficult circumstances. He promised that the temple would be built. He promised that God would deal with the nations that oppressed His people. And He promised to cleanse His people and restore Israel and cause them to be prosperous. And all of their success would come from God's strength. But now as we keep reading, the tone changes a little. Now God will warn His people. He tells them that sin will be punished, and He calls them to live right before Him. And they must repent of their sin and trust in God if God is going to bless them and restore the land. And so we start today in Zechariah chapter 5 and verse 1, and we see that those who oppose God's ways will be punished. Chapter 5, verse 1. And again I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, a flying scroll. And He said to me, "What do you see?" I answered, "I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits and its width 10 cubits. So all of a sudden, Zechariah looks up and sees this giant scroll flying in the air above his head. And so it's a scroll, like what people wrote on before we had books. And so it's a long rolled up sheet of paper that's written on, and there's a stick on each side that paper is rolled up on. Okay? So he sees this giant scroll. And when the angel asks him what he sees, Zechariah gives some more details about it. It's huge. You could hold a normal scroll in your hands, or if it's a really big one, maybe in your arms. But you can hold a scroll in your hands. But this one is 30 feet long and 15 feet wide, and it's flying. This might be a little startling to suddenly see above your head. But this scroll is a vision, and this vision alludes to God's law. This scroll alludes to God's law, His covenant and His commands. And being so big and flying over the earth pictures God's authority over all, and His decree going out to all. So let's keep reading, verse 3. Then he said to me, "This is the curse that goes out over the face of the whole land. For everyone who steals shall be cleaned out according to what is on one side, and everyone who swears falsely shall be cleaned out according to what is on the other side. I will send it out, declares the Lord of hosts, and it shall enter the house of the thief and the house of him who swears falsely by my name, and it shall remain in his house and consume it, both timber and stones." So the angel explains that this is God's decree, this scroll that he's seeing. It's God's decree, but he calls it the curse. And so it specifically is related to the blessings and the cursings that were promised in God's covenant with Israel. But the focus here is on the curse, the cursing. So this may imply that the people of the land, the Jews who are in the land, may have broken God's law and deserve God's judgment. But what's certain is that this is a reminder that they are still under the covenant and that they are expected to be faithful to God. Now, there's two specific commands that are mentioned here by the angel in his explanation. The commands about stealing and swearing falsely in God's name. And so some have suggested that these were particular sins that were prevalent among the Jews at that time. But that's not necessarily the case. It may be, but it's not necessarily the case. It seems more that these two commands were chosen to sum up the entire law. Much like when Jesus summarized the entire law by saying to love God and love your neighbor. And so stealing is wronging your neighbor. Not loving your neighbor, but wronging your neighbor. And so this represents all of the laws against doing wrong towards other people. So love your neighbor. And then swearing falsely in God's name violates the command to not take God's name in vain. You see, this command, the command of not taking the Lord's name in vain, is against treating God as nothing or as insignificant, treating him as commonplace, or you could just say less than what he actually is. And so this command not to make light of God represents all of the laws about relating properly towards God. So he's saying, do not disregard God's holiness or dishonor him, but to worship him as he should be. That's what the first of the Ten Commandments tell us about. And so all in all, the message of this vision is to keep the whole law, to be faithful to the covenant. They are to live in his ways and are expected to live right, to be righteous. And they will only be blessed if they do. But then the angel uses some more imagery, and he explains that those who don't obey God's law will be punished. See, the curse goes and remains in the house of those who violate the law, and then the house is consumed. This pictures the curse coming to your house and staying like a house guest. He's remaining there. And then he eats the house. The entire house. The point is that those who are under the curse of judgment for sin will be destroyed. The fact that the curse comes to the person's home illustrates that there's no hiding from God. Even in the privacy of your own home, God sees and people are accountable to him. And the curse coming into the home illustrates that the judgment will stay, or coming and remaining in the home illustrates that the judgment will stay in effect until God's purpose is fulfilled. And then also, the house being eaten, even the timber and stones, the building materials, illustrates complete destruction of the sinner and all he has. And it's clear that the people bring this punishment upon themselves by their sin. So, Israel can be faithful to God and be blessed, or they can be unfaithful to God and be punished. These basic principles here translate right over to us today in New Testament times as well. I mean, first, sin deserves punishment, and it brings death. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. What we deserve, what we've earned by sinning is death. That's why we need a Savior. That's why Jesus came and lived a sinless life and fulfilled the law and died on the cross to pay for our sins, so we could be forgiven and saved. And after putting our faith in Jesus, we are then God's people, and He still expects us to live right. Hebrews 12 tells us that God disciplines those He loves. So we are all accountable to Him. And the second principle we see here is that Jesus, as Jesus repeated in the Great Commandment, is to love God and love people. As God's people, we are to honor God with all that we are, and we are to treat people well, love them. We are expected to be faithful. And now as we keep reading in the seventh vision, we see that God will do away with evil. Verse 5. Then the angel who talked with me came forward and said to me, "Lift your eyes and see what this is that is going out." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "This is the basket that is going out." And he said, "This is their iniquity in all the land." And so the angel tells Zechariah to look at what's happening. Zechariah doesn't know what he's seeing, so the angel tells him what it is. It's a basket. It's a basket like one that is used for measuring out grain. But it appears from what we read later that this basket may be oversized like the scroll was in the previous vision. But to start, all we know about this basket is that it is filled with iniquity, sin. In other words, it's full of the sin and guilt of all the people of the land. And the land being mentioned here is significant as well. Back in chapter 2, verse 12, God called it the Holy Land. But here we read that there is sin or wickedness in the land. And these two don't fit together. And so the land needs to be purified. It needs to be purged. Just like the priest in the previous earlier visions needed to be purified. Now the land needs to be purified. Verse 7. And behold, the leaden cover was lifted, and there was a woman sitting in the basket. And he said, "This is wickedness." And he thrust her back into the basket and thrust down the leaden weight on its opening. And so now we learn that there's a lid made of metal on top of the basket. And it's heavy enough to stay closed and to secure the contents of the basket. But then the lid is lifted open, revealing a woman sitting in the basket. Oversized basket, I assume. So a woman sitting in the basket. And the angel explains that she represents wickedness. Now, on a side note, someone may question, why is wickedness represented by a woman as opposed to a man? Well, the answer is fairly simple. It has to do with grammar and grammatical categories. You see, the Hebrew word for wickedness is feminine, grammatically feminine. And so wickedness is illustrated with a female. In the same way, the Hebrew word for wisdom is feminine, grammatically feminine. And wisdom is pictured in the Bible many times as a woman, right? And so it's just a grammatical thing. But back to the vision. Apparently, when the lid was lifted up, the woman immediately tries to escape. The angel pushes her back down into the basket and throws down the heavy lid to keep her in. This illustrates that sin is trying to not be confined. It wants out. Sin tends to spread quickly and increase. And if given the opportunity, sin will try to run rampant. And so if God's people are to be holy, sin must be contained and kept down. And so God does it. Sin is confined to the basket, figuratively speaking. But God limits the influence of wickedness in the world. And in Zechariah specifically, in the land of Israel. But God limits that wickedness. Of course, this reminds me of 2 Thessalonians 2, where it says that the man of lawlessness, the Antichrist, is restrained till the right time. And then, after he runs amok, he will be destroyed. There's a lot of similarities here. But we see the same idea. God is limiting the influence of wickedness in the world. Verse 9. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, two women coming forward. The wind was in their wings. They had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between the earth and heaven. Then I said to the angel who talked with me, "Where are they taking the basket?" He said to me, "To the land of Shinar, to build a house for it. And when this is prepared, they will set the basket down there on its base." So now Zechariah suddenly sees these two women coming who have powerful wings, and they're coming over, they fly over, and they pick up the basket and fly away with it. And they're taking wickedness out of God's land. And just like only God could remove the sin from his people, and now we see also, and purify them, now we see also only God can remove evil from the land. Then Zechariah asks, where are they taking the basket? Well, they're going to the land of Shinar. This is another name for Babylon. In fact, it's an ancient name for that land, and you can find it back in Genesis chapter 11, verse 2. If you remember, after the flood, when the population started to grow, the people went and they settled in the land of Shinar. And what did they do there? They built a tower. They built the Tower of Babel. And so the basket is taken to Babylon. And we're told a house is built for it, and it's left there in the house. Now, the house imagery here could refer to a temple and then to idolatry, or it could just refer to a place where wickedness is confined. Of course, this wickedness would include idolatry, which was rampant in Babylon. But either way, the overall picture here is that God is removing this evil from the land and from his people. And this wickedness is symbolically taken to be kept in a place that is known for evil, for wickedness. In fact, from the beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible, Babylon represents evil, sinfulness, wickedness. It's the epitome of evil. Babylon is the seat of sin and all that opposes God. It started when people chose to directly rebel against God and build the Tower of Babel, when they rebelled against God's command to spread out and fill the earth. And in the end, Babylon will be destroyed along with all of her evil. Listen to what is said about Babylon in the book of Revelation. Revelation 17:5 says, and on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of the earth's abominations. The mother of all sins. Revelation 4:18, another angel, a second followed, saying, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all the nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. So Babylon in the Bible stands for all that is evil, all that is opposed to God. Revelation 16:9 says, the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. In other words, God will pour out all his wrath against wickedness. And Revelations 18:10 says, they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. God will do away with evil. The vision in Zechariah tells us of God purifying his holy land. He removes wickedness from his people. But evil will ultimately be done away with when Jesus returns and Babylon, the evil system of this world that spreads its sinful ways and rebellious ways throughout the world, it will be destroyed. And you know, I really can't wait for that day when sin will no longer be part of our lives in any way. And we'll be able to serve our God in perfect holiness with no remaining scraps, remnants of sin hanging on. And we can be fully pleasing to him in everything we do. But between now and then, God is still working in our lives. He will discipline us. He wants to purify his people. And so as his people who have been justified, declared righteous, and who've been declared holy through the death of Jesus, we want to live that way too. We want to be righteous. We want to live holy lives. And the only way we can is by drawing near to him. Talk to him. Listen to him from his word. Learn from his discipline. Don't just ignore it, but listen and learn from his discipline. And as we live for him, we will continue to change. He will change us. He will make us holy. He will conform us to the image of his Son until that day when sin will be completely abolished. Aren't you looking forward to that day? I am. But we don't have to wait till eternity to live for his glory. As Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 10:31, do all to the glory of God. God will do away with evil. And he expects his people, even now, to live faithfully in obedience to him. Well, let's look at the 8th and final vision. We see that God will make everything good. Chapter 6, verse 1. Again, I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 4 chariots came out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black horses, the third white horses, and the fourth chariot dappled horses, all of them strong. Then I answered and said to the angel who talked with me, what are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said to me, these are going out to the 4 winds of heaven, or they are the 4 spirits going out. After presenting themselves, there's a translation issue there. The word that can be translated either heavens or spirits. So there's a little question there about which way it actually should be specifically. And he said, so they're going now, after presenting themselves before the Lord, verse 6, the chariot with the black horses goes toward the north country, and the white ones go after them, and the dapple ones go toward the south country. Okay, so Zechariah sees these 4 chariots. They're being pulled by different colored horses. And all of these horses are strong. And at the time, the chariots, at this time when Zechariah is seeing these visions, chariots were the most effective and dominant war machines that there were. And so these picture military might. And they ride out between 2 bronze mountains. Bronze is also a symbol of strength. And so they ride out from the presence of God in strength. And so there are a couple important things to notice in the angel's explanation. First, God is referred to as the Lord of all the earth. So this title is purposeful here. It's used purposefully here to make the point that God is sovereign. He's in control over all the earth. He rules over all. Secondly, we're told the specific direction of some of the chariots go in. One goes to the south. Well, who's to the south of Israel? Egypt. And so south refers to Egypt. They were still an important power at the time. But then one goes to the north, and the north refers to Babylon, which was the center of power on earth at the time. And so it's also significant, though, that these are the 2 directions that any enemies of Israel would come from to attack them. But here, God's chariots, God's agents are going to the north and the south in those directions. And so this vision pictures God as the almighty, sovereign ruler of the world. And the chariots with their strong horses are coming from his presence. In other words, God is sending out his representatives to patrol or to do battle on the earth. And particular attention is given to the strongest military powers of the day. But God will subdue any and all enemies. He's in control of all the earth. Verse 7. When the strong horses came out, they were impatient to go and patrol the earth. And he said, "Go, patrol the earth." So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried to me, "Behold, those who go towards the north country have set my spirit at rest in the north country." So God's angelic representatives here, pictured by the horses and the chariots, they are ready and they are anxious to get to work. And they'll go throughout the world carrying out God's directive. They're just waiting for God to say, "Go." And he says, "Go." But the country to the north is mentioned again. And this is Babylon again, the epitome of human sin and rebellion against God. And then God says his spirit is now at rest. This is a victory cry when he says that my spirit's at rest. God has defeated evil Babylon. And this is about more than just one city, though. God has defeated evil. Again, Babylon is representing all the enemies of God. And so this looks forward to the future when Jesus returns and rules on the earth, and sin and opposition towards God will be brought to an end. But it's significant that God says that his spirit will be at rest. Being at rest suggests ceasing work or finishing work. When you read this, does it make you think of any other passage in the Bible that speaks about God resting? How about creation? If you remember, God created for 6 days, and on the 7th day he did what? He rested. He ceased from his work. The work of creation was done, and when the work of creation was done, how was it described? He said everything was good. In other words, it was just as it should be. In the future, there will again be a time when the work will be finished. Sin and rebellion against God and His ways will be done away with. And God's people will be fully restored, and they will be holy, and they will be blessed, as the earlier visions have said. But in that future, everything will again be good. It will be as God intended. Everything that was wrong will be done away with and will be made right. God has been working, and He is still working toward this perfect end. And a day is coming when that work will be complete, and He will rest from that work. And the following verses here in Zechariah show us how this is all tied up in a person. Look at verse 9. The word of the Lord came to me. Take from the exiles Hildai, Tobiah, and Jediah, who arrived from Babylon, and go to the same day to the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. Take from them silver and gold, and make a crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. And say to him, Thus says the Lord of hosts, Behold the man whose name is the branch. For he shall branch out from his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. It is he who shall build the temple of the Lord, and shall bear royal honor, and shall sit and rule on his throne. And there shall be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace shall be between them both. And so this here is not a vision, but it is a prophetic message from God. God tells Zechariah to do something that is symbolic, and to use that to communicate something to God's people. And so there are some men who didn't come back from Babylon with the first group of the exiles who returned, but they have just returned from Babylon, from exile. And God tells Zechariah to go to them and to take some silver and gold from them and to use that to make a crown out of that silver and gold. Then the crown is to be put on the head of Joshua, the high priest. Now this is very interesting because this word for crown refers to a royal crown. It's a king's crown. But Joshua was a priest, not a king. But then God tells the priest to behold, or to see, to notice, to look at the man whose name is Branch. But who is the branch? We've seen this name before, or this title before. This name is used of the Messiah, of a descendant of David who will be king. Now earlier in Zechariah, the name was applied to Zerubbabel, the governor, but ultimately look forward to the Messiah. And so here we have the priest with a crown on his head, and we have a kingly figure as well, the branch. Then God continues to talk about the branch and says that He will build the temple. So this seems to be referring to Zerubbabel as before, because who built the temple? Zerubbabel oversaw the building of the temple. But then God repeats that He will build the temple and says that He will be enthroned, and he'll have royal honor, and He's going to sit on His throne. This is not about Zerubbabel. And historically, he was never a king. And then God goes on to say that the priest will sit on the branch's throne. And the priest and the king together will bring peace. And so, in the immediate historical context, this referred to Joshua the priest and Zerubbabel the governor working together to accomplish what God told them to do. They will build the temple together. But this prophecy goes beyond that historical context to the future. It looks to the branch, the Messiah. And in this prophecy, we see a blending of the priestly and the kingly roles. because the Messiah will sit on his throne as king, but he will also sit on his throne as a priest. Jesus is both priest and king. And so the kingly crown on the priest's head symbolically represents the coming Messiah who will fulfill both of those roles, who is both king and priest. Verse 14. And the crown shall be in the temple of the Lord as a reminder to Helam, Tobiah, Jediah, and Hin, the son of Zephaniah. And those who are far off shall come and help to build the temple of the Lord. And you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. And this shall come to pass if you will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. And so God will cause those who are far off to come to him and to give towards building the temple. Now, this would include Jews who are still in exile, still far off, but even Gentiles. In fact, in the Old Testament, Gentiles are often talked about, those are spoken of as those who are far off, far away. But when the temple is finished, the crown that Zechariah made and put on the priest's head is to be kept in the temple. And that crown is to be kept there as a testimony to God's faithfulness. It will remind the people that God worked in their midst to make them successful in the building of the temple. But it will also remind them that God will continue to be faithful and he will still do what he has promised to do. So, if God's people faithfully obey him, they will be blessed. Now let's go back just for a minute and talk about Jesus. He is our priest and king. He is the descendant of David. He is the Messiah, the promised one who came to rule in perfect righteousness and to save his people. He is also our priest. He is fully God and fully man, the only one who could stand as mediator, as a priest between God and people. He lived a sinless life and he fulfilled God's law. He gave himself as the perfect sacrifice to pay for our sin so we could be forgiven and so we could be cleansed and declared righteous. And he allows us to enter into God's presence, to go boldly before the throne of grace. And Jesus, he has been exalted over all, and he will rule over the earth. He is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And under his rule, life will be perfect. Literally perfect. And this stands as both a warning and an encouragement. First, the warning. Only those who believe in Jesus will experience this eternal blessing. Acts 4:12 says, "And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved." There's only one way to be saved, and that's by Jesus. By putting your faith in Jesus. Those who reject Jesus will pay the price for their sin. They will be consumed by judgment. And the only way to be saved from that judgment, the only way to be reconciled to God, is Jesus. Turn from your sin and put your faith in Jesus. And then the encouragement for all who have believed in Jesus. This reminds us that one day we will see him face to face, and we will be with him forever. And life, it will be good. And I mean good, just right, just as it should be. There will be no sorrow or pain. There will be no sin struggle. It will be just right. Everything will be perfect. God has promised He will punish sin. He will do away with evil. And He will make everything good. Everything will be right.